alarm. What's the location of the emergency?
It's on 24th Street in Osborne.
Okay, in the McDonald's there, ma'am?
It's inside McDonald's.
Okay.
One of our employees fell down.
Okay.
And she's pregnant.
Okay. Is she complaining of any pain anywhere?
I'm sorry?
Is she complaining of any pain?
Yeah, she's crying. She can't stand up.
Okay, I'm going to get some help on the way out there.
Okay.
Where is she having pain?
And she's pregnant.
Okay, how far along is she?
I don't know.
Do you know how many months?
4 months.
4 months? Okay. Did she hit her head or pass out at all?
I'm sorry?
Did she hit her head or pass out at all?
No, she fell down like in her bottom.
And she wasn't up on a ladder or anything? She just fell from standing?
She just slipped from on the floor.
Okay. All right, just keep her comfortable. Don't move her. They'll be there in just a few minutes to help her out, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Right, thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, on May 31st at about 2100 hours, Engine 61 was dispatched to a fall injury at 3323 North 24th Street in McDonald's. We get in the truck. PTI is 24-year-old pregnant female, tripped and fell. That's the only information we got. Roll up on scene, and we were met by the manager immediately outside. She confirmed that there was somebody who tripped and fell. When we went in, we actually were led back to the kitchen, which was still in full operation. Patrons were making their orders, burgers were getting cooked, fries were getting fried. Go back to the back of the kitchen, and there was a female at the top of the stairs laying down. The only information we continued to get from the manager was that she tripped and fell.
Try to figure out what's going on, okay? We're going to put a blood pressure cuff on you.
Do you know her name?
Anything?
She wasn't really talking to us at all. She seemed like she was either injured or upset, crying, slightly hysterical with the way she wasn't answering any of our questions.
Nobody there was really helping us with any information. It's like nobody knew what was going on.
You need to try to control your breathing. You're breathing too fast. You're going to hyperventilate. Your fingers are going to start to tingle. You're going to have cramping. So can you try to work with me here?
Is your stomach hurt?
At some point, one of the other workers told us that she fell as she was coming up the stairs. So myself and the engineer decided we'd go down and see if there was something slippery or what might have happened.
We're going to just check it out.
Does anybody know her name?
Smell anything?
I don't smell anything.
Does anybody know her name?
You're gonna
Anybody know what happened? We got to the bottom of the stairs, and he was ahead of me, and we were just, using our nose, trying to sniffing around, see if she slipped on something, if it was wet down there. We didn't know.
Didn't really smell anything. I didn't really smell anything, but my engineer said that he could smell something. As I was taking some deep breaths, I knew that, or I felt like a little burning in my throat and a little burning in my lungs. But when we looked around, we're really in the basement for maybe 15 seconds, but there were paint cans down there were chemicals down there, supplies that they would normally keep in a basement or in a shed.
I said, something doesn't seem right. I said, let's get out of here. Something's going on. I don't feel right. I smell something really weird, and he agreed.
We decided to go ahead and head back up the stairs, and I was about halfway up when I looked up and saw my engineer fall into the wall.
Talk to us.
As we're walking back up the stairs, right as I got to the top, I started getting lightheaded and dizzy, and right when I got to the top of the stairs, I just collapsed and fell, and it just kind of uncontrollable. I couldn't control myself. I just wasn't sure what was going on.
And I didn't really understand what was going on. He didn't seem like he was that disoriented while we were going up, but just as about the same distance that I was from him, as I cleared that distance, I got really lightheaded myself. The breaths that I was taking started to cause me to cough. And as soon as I got to the top of the stairs, I told my captain, I don't know what's down there, but something is down there that's not making me feel right. It's not making me, breathe right.
What's going on?
There's something down there.
Let's go. Everybody out. Everybody out. Let's go. Grab her. Let's get out of here. Out of here. Everybody out of here. Everybody out of here. When I looked at them, I knew something was wrong. And they said that they almost passed out. And I knew they weren't joking around. So immediately called for a 3-in-1 hazardous, an additional ALS and a rescue for the patient. Luckily, there was a Phoenix police officer on scene who kind of saw us rolling hot and it was nice having a uniformed officer there to help us evacuate the restaurant. There were still people in the drive-thru making their order, people sitting down and eating. We got the restaurant evacuated immediately. The response was on its way, and we were able to, my guys were still functional enough where we were able to stretch, hand jack a line across 24th Street, stretch a hand line, and wait for hazmat teams to roll up.
Phoenix McDonald's had to be evacuated after fumes caused a pregnant employee to pass out. This happened last night near 24th Street and Osborne. Police got the call that a pregnant employee had fainted in the stairway. Workers say she had been feeling lightheaded and dizzy, and authorities found carbon dioxide leaking from the soda machines in the basement. They say it was a dangerous situation, and it was lucky that no one was hurt. The woman is going to be okay, by the way.
You know, restaurants historically, and Circle K's and everything else, have historically used CO2 to carbonate their beverages, but they've always been just pressurized tanks. In the last, and I don't know when it's happened, but we're seeing it more and more often where they're starting to use liquid CO2 dewars, and because they can fill that one CO2 tank, the owner told me, once a month, where the other tanks, they were filling them every couple days. Really what had happened down there is with that liquid CO2 leaking, it filled that basement completely up. It was basically a swimming pool full of CO2. So you have a huge CO2 liquid tank below grade and a fairly significant leak at a 3,000 to 1 expansion ratio. It pushed a significant amount of oxygen out of the air and filled the whole basement up with CO2.
We assembled an entry team in full PPE with breathing air. We also brought down our what we call our Sirius meter, which is an air monitoring meter, and also our Gas Ranger natural gas meters. Upon going down the stairs into the basement of the McDonald's, I immediately got an alarm on my Sirius meter indicating there was a decreased amount of oxygen in the atmosphere, which was concerning to us because, you know, obviously there's something in there that's displacing that oxygen. That means something's going on down there. So we proceeded down the stairs. At the base of the stairs, almost immediately, all the alarms started going off on all of the meters, including the natural gas meter, which was a little bit concerning to us because we really weren't expecting that. We brought that down just to be safe, but that meter was indicating almost 100% gas in the atmosphere, which kind of changed the perspective of the whole incident because it really wasn't something we were expecting. So at that point, we sort of decided that, you know, this was more than we'd bargained for. This was definitely something that was extremely hazardous, and we elected at that point to withdraw out of the space, go back outside, secure the utilities to the building, and then kind of talk about what we had found in a safe location so that we can come up with maybe a better game plan to handle this. One of the things that I did notice when we were making our entry, when these meters were going off, is I did view this CO2 tank, and I noticed that there was a device next to it that marked that it was a CO2 detector, and it indicated that it had power to it. It had a ready light, and it was also not alarming at the time. So that was one of the things that was kind of a curveball to us in this incident, is that we had every reason in the world to believe this was a CO2 leak, yet it had a detector right next to the container itself that was not indicating that there was a problem at the time. Later, I believe it was discovered that tape had been put over that detection device while they were filling it or working on it for whatever reason, and they neglected to remove the tape, rendering the detector useless. Normally, things that are that hazardous or have those types of chemicals involved are always very clearly labeled as to emergency procedures to shut down, etc. This really didn't have any of that. There was no clear markings as to how to shut the container down. So we were kind of starting from scratch in terms of the learning curve of how to secure this. We were able to locate some very small thumb valves on several of the different ports at the top of the container, which we assumed could only be valves that would shut the product off. There really wasn't a main valve, a big thing, anything painted red or something that you would discern as in emergency situations that you would secure that with. So we turned off all the valves. We didn't hear any active leaking at the time. It showed that the container, I believe, was half full, which if it was filled that day, that led us to believe that there was possibly something involved with that, where half that product may have escaped out. So we did secure all of that. We also checked the hot water heater and some of the other gas appliances down there, and they appeared to be functioning normally. At that time, when we were down in the basement, we were getting oxygen readings of 17.5% on our Sirius meter, and normal would be 20.8, 21%, something in that area. So several percent of the ambient oxygen was being eaten up by something that was down in that basement. So we definitely had something pretty serious going on. We did secure the CO2. We also had the gas secured. So at that time, it was made. The decision was made that we were going to go ahead and back out, and we were going to attempt to ventilate the space and see if that would change the atmosphere. Since we had the squad truck with us, we already carry confined space fans with us, which was a valuable tool in doing this, because with a confined space fan, you can put the bellows down into a subterranean space and vent it from the bottom. And since CO2 is heavier than air, it sinks to the bottom, and that's where all of it's going to be. And this fan device will actually suck air from the bottom and expel it out of the building. So it was actually a very effective tool that we used to get this space cleared. So we did set up a confined space fan. This particular McDonald's had the basement with an exterior stairwell that went to the outside. We simply ran the bellows down the stairs and put the confined space fan up on the top, and then cleared the area so that didn't affect anybody else when it expelled that gas outside. The two curveballs we really had in this situation were the malfunctioning CO2 detector that was right next to the tank itself. And the other curveball that we had was the fact that we had gotten a high indication of natural gas present when we were making this entry on our natural gas meter. After further research and speaking with the manufacturers of the device of the Gas Ranger, it was discovered that in actuality CO2, the physical properties, the chemical properties of CO2 will mimic natural gas in that detection device and actually provide you with a false positive. So we had a false positive, an indication of large amounts of natural gas, yet in actuality there really wasn't any. And that was the first time for us to know that. I've never heard of that in the hazmat world, and I think a lot of people learned that night as well. So there were several curveballs in this incident that we kind of had to overcome, but all in all, fortunately, no one got hurt, no one died, and we learned a very good lesson. And hopefully in the future we'll be able to handle these situations with much more efficiency.
More and more restaurants and Circle K's and everything else are switching over to this liquid CO2 system because of that expansion ratio. But for us, what it means, all these things that we've found at least are all plumbed with plastic line. And the freeze and thaw, those lines have the potential to break and cause the situation we had. The significance of this incident to us is we had 2 potential civilian victims and possibly more. A lot of times in these situations, the potential rescuers end up being more of the problem than the initial person that was down. And then, of course, the close call for our firefighters. We had 2 firefighters go down into that basement, into an oxygen deficient atmosphere, and were aware enough to get out of there before they went down. So it's a pretty significant incident for us. It really opened our eyes to the fact that there are these systems all over the city, and they're all plumbed the same way. There's the potential danger at every one of them.
Carbon dioxide gas has a very long history in the world of causing death. And this, interestingly enough, can even occur in open air, because carbon dioxide is heavier than air in general and can settle in low-lying areas. So even carbon dioxide, for example, coming out of the opening of mines or whatever to the surface can settle in low-lying areas, so that persons walking through those areas can actually pass out and die because of elevated CO2 concentrations. The toxicity of carbon dioxide is due to 2 major factors. The first is that it's what's termed a simple asphyxiant, in that it can displace air. And since air is about 20.8 or 21% oxygen, when you displace that oxygen, you're removing the oxygen that we need to breathe. So you're entering a low oxygen environment. But unlike other simple asphyxiants such as nitrogen gas or argon gas, for example, or even helium, which is a common gas used for suicide, unlike those other gases, carbon dioxide in high concentrations also can directly affect the brain to produce coma and respiratory depression. And we call this carbon dioxide narcosis, or CO2 narcosis.
The big issue with it is that it's an oxygen displacer. But in high concentrations like we had there at McDonald's, they said the potential was about 25% CO2 in that air in the basement. At that high of a concentration, you tend to get a bitter taste in your mouth because the saliva in your mouth breaks that CO2 down into carbonic acid. So you will typically get some sort of a bitter taste, and we had a couple guys on scene reporting that bitter taste.
The person may start breathing rapidly, feeling as though they can't get their breath. As their brain begins to fail from lack of oxygen, they may become lightheaded. Their visual fields may begin to constrict, and their heart rate will increase. They may or may not detect that. And then they will simply go to sleep and pass out from lack of oxygen and from the narcotic effect of very high concentrations of carbon dioxide as well.
You know, this incident will definitely change my approach to those scenarios forever. That basement is a confined space. There are those large CO2 tanks down there, and when I reflect back about the incident as to how we operated, we operated within our operating procedures, and I think the scariest part about this is that this could have potentially been a life-threatening incident, and it was solely based on the actions of others. And those tanks being in there, the large tanks being in there, us getting no information, very little information, having to guess, having to investigate ourselves, do all those things that we do on a normal day-to-day basis.
All of the information that I've heard about that incident, that it could have been a lot worse than it was, I guess. We go on all kinds of different calls on a regular basis and oftentimes don't give them a second thought as long as we make it back to the station. But I guess the margin of error on this call was a lot less than what it normally is. I guess we could have very easily just taken one breath and passed out down there. The two of us being down there kind of investigating, who knows how long it would have been that we'd have been laying down there before somebody else came down and the same thing happened to them. Now you got 3-4 firefighters laying in your basement unconscious, and how long before they're discovered?